As an F2P or new player, facing endgame content can be incredibly challenging with a limited roster. While some characters are highly favored, many are locked behind the paywall of being limited 5-star units. But did you know that some 4-star characters are so strong they can even surpass 5 stars? Today, we're going to explore the top 4-star characters that you should prioritize building. Before we dive in, let me clarify how this tier list is structured. It's divided into 2 tiers. Tier 0, which represents the highest level, and Tier T1, which denotes the lower tier. Also, keep in mind that some of these 4-star characters truly shine at Constellation 6, but we'll still consider their value at lower constellations. Without further ado, let's get into it. At number 10, we have Gaming. Gaming is an on-field DPS that deals most of his damage through his special plunging attacks powered by his skill. Gaming's damage output is highly respectable for a 4-star, and while his kit can inflict self-damage, he can also heal himself too, which is pretty sustained. Though there are several options in characters who can mimic his role and damage output. His animations are flashy and satisfying to play, making him a great pickup for new players. Energy recharge is, as usual, a concern for the character. However, his needs are easily rectified by including Bennett in the team, Favonius weapons. With no elemental support from other pyro units, you'll need about 180% recharge. There's also the fact that he really needs his C6 to truly pop off and shine. I think many people just don't have C6 gaming, and if you do, you probably haven't raised him since there are so many pyro DPS options available. It's not like you need to rush out and immediately get yourself a gaming. Plus, his best team requires Farina, Bennett, and Xian Yun, which is a pretty expensive investment. You definitely don't need all 3 of them, and he has some other pretty solid options. Despite these factors, Gaming deserves his spot in Tier 1 on the tier list. His unique playstyle and impressive damage potential, especially with the right setup and constellations, make him a valuable character. Even if he's not the most accessible or straightforward choice, his potential to deliver high damage and his flashy combat style ensure that he remains a strong contender. Faruzan is designed to fulfill the role of a niche elemental support character, but specifically for Anemo. Since Anemo characters lack strong elemental reactions, Faruzan's ability to enhance raw Anemo damage is a much-needed addition to the game. Combined with her skill provides grouping with the pressurized collapse vortices from her special charged shots. This is especially valuable for players who prefer using Anemo characters as main DPS instead of just as support elements. However, Faruzan requires C6 to truly excel, boosting Anemo DPS characters like Wanderer and Xiao significantly. The additional buff of 40% Anemo crit damage while lowering her ER requirements and providing more consistent resistance shred and grouping puts her above any other pure Anemo support. Together with the rest of her kit, it makes Faruzan the best Anemo damage supporting unit by far. Her abilities are focused on mono Anemo teams, and her C6 makes her an exceptional support. Despite being locked to C6, her power is undeniable. If we see stronger Anemo DPS characters in the future, Faruzan's rank might rise even further. For now, she firmly deserves a spot in Tier 1. Chevreuse is a dedicated support character who specializes in providing support for overload teams that consist exclusively of pyro and electro characters. Much like Nilou, Chevreuse has a strict team-building restriction, as her support abilities won't function properly if you include characters outside of the pyro and electro elements. Her specialty lies in reducing enemies' electro and pyro resistance, while also healing the team and buffing attack. However, her utility is limited outside of this specific role. Some players may be hesitant to pull for a character with such team restrictions, especially since popular compositions often include an Anemo character for the specialized artifact set, Viridescent Venerer, which reduces enemy resistance to a swirled element by 40%. However, Chevreuse's resistance shred is also 40% and applies to both pyro and electro, making her a superior option to an Anemo character in many cases. As a 4-star, she is already a solid choice for budget players, especially since most of the best pyro and electro characters are either freely obtainable or accessible through Paimon's bargains, which you accumulate currency for just by spending primo gems on any banner. Chevreuse's weapon selection is also exceptionally budget-friendly, with her best-in-slot being a 3-star weapon that can be accessed just by playing the game. Her constellations are also not necessary, making her a contender for the most budget-friendly 4-star in the game. But if you ask me what's the best cons for her, it's her C6, which significantly increased pyro and electro damage. With all this in mind, Chevreuse deserves to be in number 8 on Tier 1. Her unique role in overload teams and budget-friendly attributes make her a valuable addition to any roster focused on pyro and electro synergy. Yao Yao is a functional Dendro healer. If you need a Dendro healer in your party and don't have Baizhu, Yao Yao can fill that role seamlessly without any major drawbacks. Unlike many other 4-star characters, Yao Yao doesn't have significant issues. The usefulness of Yao Yao's burst depends on the team you're using her with. It can be especially helpful for tanking and healing your team periodically, particularly with self-damaging teams or those that drive Dendro reactions. One of the biggest beneficiaries of Yao Yao's kit is Nilou, the Bloom specialist. With how the Bloom reaction works, Yao Yao can tank damage and heal effectively, even handling the self-damaging mechanics from Nilou's Bountiful Bloom. Yao Yao is among the least constellation-dependent characters. Even at C0, she performs well as a healer in Aggravate or Nilou Bloom teams. However, she becomes even more impressive with her C2, which helps mitigate the high 80 energy cost of her Elemental Burst. Unlocking her first 2 constellations allows you to build her with less focus on energy recharge, further enhancing her overall utility. For this cute healer, I would give her number 7 on Tier 1. Her ability to fit seamlessly into Dendro-based teams, combined with her low constellation dependency and effective healing, makes her a standout choice for anyone needing a reliable Dendro healer. If it weren't for Kazuha, Sucrose would easily deserve a spot in the top 5. Sucrose's traditional role in the party is to group enemies in one place, allowing your DPS to clear them out quickly. Although Sucrose might not always be the go-to choice for players, she's an excellent Aggravate and Swirl character. Her versatility and ability to use the Viridescent Venerer set make her incredibly valuable, especially with C6, which provides a reliable 20% elemental damage bonus for the corresponding absorbed element. Sucrose is a highly desirable unit in Aggravate teams due to both her role consolidation and her accessibility as a 4-star unit. Sucrose's ability to share EM is extremely valuable in such teams due to the damage formulas scaling quite well with EM. Adding this on top of the fact that she brings grouping, VV Shred, and added damage with her swirls proccing Aggravate consistently, it is pretty easy to see why her value has only increased since the release of Dendro. On top of all this, Sucrose can excel as a driver for some Aggravate comps as well, especially for teams that want a good on-field option due to her ability to trigger chain reactions with Aggravate. She's also effective in boss fights and offers a useful Thrilling Tales buff. Sucrose's value as a versatile, free-to-play character with substantial utility and damage potential ensures she remains a top-tier choice, even if she doesn't crack the top 5. Coming up to the top 5 or T0, you could probably already guess what's coming. At number 5, we have Fischl. She is an off-field DPS who typically only needs to be on the field for about 2 seconds at a time, twice per rotation. Once Fischl gains her constellations and reaches her 4th ascension, she becomes one of the best characters in this role. Fischl is also an extremely versatile character, able to carry her weight in damage on practically any team that uses her. Her damage output skyrockets even further when combined with elemental reactions, especially Aggravate or the old Taser Electro Charged. Her role is simple. Summon her bird companion Oz, and let the rest of your team do the heavy lifting. Summoning Oz happens with both her skill and burst, making Oz's attacks the bread and butter of her kit. While some players use her as an on-field attacker, this usually isn't optimal. Her energy requirements are also minimal, 120 to 150% depending on the number of electro units on the team, due to the amount of energy Oz generates. In fact, including Fischl on a team often reduces the whole team's energy recharge requirements. She stands among the best energy batteries in the game, right alongside the Electro Archon, the Raiden Shogun. What earns her the 5th spot is her C6 constellation, which allows her to continuously apply Electro to enemies at a consistent rate while dealing impressive damage. Her role in facilitating team synergy and maximizing elemental reactions makes her a standout character in any roster. All things considered, Fischl's versatility, high damage potential, and exceptional energy generation make her a top-tier choice. While she was initially ridiculed for her low damage potential and limited utility, Kuki Shinobu has emerged as one of the strongest characters in the game, thanks to the introduction of the Dendro element in version 3.0. Her masterful ability to consistently trigger Hyper Bloom reactions has elevated her to a top-tier status. Her gameplay is also very simple. You don't use Shinobu's normal attacks at all. Instead, you swap into her, use her skill, and burst if necessary, then swap to your next character. It's surprising how much Shinobu can do for your team with so little field time. Now this is where things get debatable. Many argue that Kuki isn't even in the top 5 because her kit seems to only fit one team, Hyper Bloom. But hear me out. Yes, Kuki excels in just one team, but that team is incredibly powerful. Hyper Bloom has been a top-tier meta strategy since its introduction. Not only can Kuki sustain the self-damage caused by Hyper Bloom, but she's also become a viable choice for supporting the best Dendro DPS characters like Al-Haytham, with her off-field electro capabilities. You could easily clear the game with Kuki at C0, but if you manage to get her to C2+, she becomes even more busted. This constellation grants Shinobu infinite uptime on her skill, as long as you time it correctly. An excellent feature for maximizing Hyper Bloom reactions. Kuki's power might still be up for debate, but when you consider the dominance of the Hyper Bloom meta, she undeniably deserves the number 4 spot. While some may argue that her effectiveness is limited to just one team composition, it's crucial to recognize the impact of that team. Xiangling has been a powerhouse since Genshin Impact's launch and remains one of the strongest sub-DPS characters in the game. What's even better is that she's completely free, just by playing through the first few floors of Spiral Abyss. As an off-field DPS, Xiangling deals the vast majority of her damage through her burst. Although she has high energy needs and an expensive burst, she rewards the investment with massive damage that can even surpass on-field DPS units. One of the key factors contributing to Xiangling's strength is the lack of internal cooldown, ICD, on her pyro application, allowing her to repeatedly trigger powerful elemental reactions with any character that synergizes with her. However, even without reactions, Xiangling can still dish out exceptional damage in nearly pure pyro teams. One of the drawbacks of using Xiangling is her immense energy recharge requirement, which typically hovers around 220% or more. However, this problem can be drastically reduced by including an additional pyro character, or 2, on the team, or by equipping Favonius weapons on 1 or more characters. Xiangling's raw power cannot be understated. A team with Bennett, Xiangling, and any Anemo character can clear almost any Spiral Abyss cycle. The damage is often high enough with sufficient investment that a 4th character sometimes isn't needed at all. If you plan to get 36 stars in Spiral Abyss regularly, having her with as many constellations as possible will carry you far. Her effectiveness is notably boosted with her C4 constellation. This constellation increases her burst duration by 40%, giving you a lot of extra hits. It's an insanely good constellation, and you should aim to unlock it as soon as possible. Considering all this, Xiangling's place as number 3 on Tier 0 is well-deserved. Her ability to carry teams through the toughest content, especially in Spiral Abyss, is unmatched by most other characters. Xingqiu is an off-field DPS who delivers most of his damage through his skill and burst. His field time is minimal, maxing out at around 3 to 4 seconds depending on the weapon, but he offers an enormous amount of damage and support for that low-time investment. He's often compared to the highly popular limited 5-star unit, Yellen, due to their overlap in roles. Where Xingqiu truly shines is in his ability to maintain a hydro aura on enemies, while also dealing respectable damage, enabling teammates to trigger powerful hydro-based reactions like Vaporize and Hyper Bloom. Xingqiu is already great at C0, but after acquiring all constellations, he becomes comparable to, and often even better than, some 5-star characters. His damage output, exceptional hydro application, damage reduction, interruption resistance buffs for your active party member, and minor healing make him incredibly valuable. A skilled player can often forgo a dedicated healer entirely, relying on Xingqiu and perhaps a shielder if survivability becomes an issue. His healing isn't exceptional, but it's just enough to carry you through the abyss. Xingqiu is the best option for a hydro unit in many of the best teams like Hyper Bloom, Vaporize, and national team in the game, and your account will undeniably be better with a C6 Xingqiu. Nearly every Pyro on-field DPS benefits from his support and damage. He is a high priority even at C0, highly flexible unit that you should acquire and max out as soon as possible. Considering all this, I think it's fair to rank Xingqiu as the second best character due to his incredible kit. Honestly, I'm not sure what MiHoYo was thinking, but at this point, he could be considered the true Pyro Archon. Jokes aside, Bennett's staying power as one of the top supports in the game is thanks to his incredible elemental burst. With a low cooldown, a huge buff that doubles as a heal, decent sub-DPS potential, and rapid energy generation, you might need to build him with more HP or attack or adjust your rotations, but the results speak for themselves. Characters like Arlecchino and Hu Tao team also greatly benefit from Bennett's presence. With his first constellation, the health requirement to receive the attack buff from Bennett disappears, offering almost unlimited buff uptime on your characters. Leveling this talent is your top priority. Initially, C6 was controversial due to its tendency to disrupt certain team compositions that don't want Pyro infusion. However, it's now generally agreed that C6 does more good than harm. If you plan to pair Bennett with a physical DPS like Eula though, it's best to avoid C6. Now, it's time to give Bennett his rightful place on the tier list. Honestly, it's no surprise. He's been a staple in the game for so long, and his impact is undeniable. Every time a new character drops, the question always comes up, but how do they compare to Bennett? And more often than not, Bennett still comes out on top. So as I drag his icon to the top, it's just a reminder that some things never change. Bennett is still the king of supports. That wraps up our list of the top 10 4-star characters in Genshin Impact. With this tier list, we hope that you can choose what character to build in order to complete the endgame challenges. But hey, this is just one take on the meta, and everyone's experience can be different. You can easily log in with Google or create an account using another email. If you've got a different opinion or want to share your own ranking, feel free to jump into the tier list I created on the website. Your perspective could really help other players refine their strategies too. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time.